Now, a federal high court in Port Harcourt has dismissed a motion by the FIRS for a stay of execution of an earlier judgment directing Rivers State to take charge of value-added tax collection. However, the Federal Inland Revenue Service is asking taxpayers not to panic over the court ruling. It says until the Court of Appeal or the Supreme Court determines the matter, taxpayers are required to continue to comply with their value-added tax obligations within the status quo framework. Meanwhile, Governor Nyesom Wike has directed the State Inland Revenue Service to fully implement and enforce the collection of taxes.
Now, for more on the VAT controversy and political economy-related issues, we're now being joined by Akintayo Iwilade, a lawyer, and also the officer at the Simon Cooper and Company. I want to say very big afternoon to you, and thank you for joining us here on Newsday. Yes, it's good to have you here today. Now let's get straight into the meat of the matter, as we hear that the Federal Inland Revenue Service are still threatening those paying to the Rivers State government after losing to court, because they're saying up until probably the Court of Appeal or the Supreme Court hears this matter and determines the way forward, all revenue should still be collected by the FIRS.
I think clearly as things stand, the decision of the court has to be respected by every party that are in court, by taxpayers, by the FIRS, and of course also by the government of Rivers State. And the general position of the law is that the judgment of a court takes immediate effect from the point of pronouncement. However, where there is an appeal against such a judgment, an appeal does not by itself automatically operate as a stay of execution of any judgment of the court. A party who desires to have the judgment of a court stayed or its execution stayed would of course approach the same court to ask that that judgment be stayed from execution pending the determination of the appeal. And where the said lower court refuses, then of course you still have the option of approaching the appellate court to ask that the same, order that was refused by the lower court be granted by the appellate court. But until the appellate court grants such an order by law, the judgment of the lower court begins to subsist. However, there is also the general principle of law that where a specific issue has been submitted before a court of law, and you, for example, are aware of it, you, for example, are also aware of it, regardless of your personal preference of one way or the other that the government should go, the court always enjoins that parties should at least a bit circumspect in the way they approach the execution in order not to foist the situation of what we call fait accompli on the Court of Appeal. But speaking outside of even the technical details of the law, the subject, because this is a subject of VAT, and I'm sure everybody is interested in it as Nigerians, and this is something that touches on the revenue of government, touches on the obligations of us as citizens, taxpayers, and of course the general principles of federalism. I think that for Rivers State, the Rivers State government should be commended for reopening this conversation about fiscal federalism in Nigeria. It's an entry point into the broader conversation of where we really are on the subject of fiscal federalism in Nigeria. Now, I would, while commending the government of Rivers State, I would also mention that the party had been ongoing before the arrival of Rivers State. Lagos State, for example, has always been at the forefront of this broadening of conversations around deeper political and fiscal federalism. Now, you recall that Lagos State had also sought to challenge the exclusivity of the powers of the federal government to impose, value-added taxes and to ensure that the capacity of the states are unleashed by allowing the states to have a measure of control over consumption taxes, over building services, and several other heads of services and all of that. So there are conflicting decisions of the courts on this question of VAT. There are some decisions that seem to suggest that by virtue of the VAT Act that had been long enacted, even prior to the 1999 Constitution, that states cannot move into that space on the basis that the federal government has already covered the field in legislation. But then we have another judgment that says, no, the federal government, by even the structure of the 1999 Constitution, do not have authority to venture into the collection of value-added taxes.
All right, but permit me at this point to just probably buttress my second question,
Very well.
which states that the agency are warning defaulters that those that pay their taxes to the states as against the federal government will be penalized.
Now, the question would be that if the basis of my action is founded or rooted in a judgment of a court, it would be strange that I eventually would then have to still be penalized under the law for obeying a judgment of a court. So this should speak to the judiciary to speed up the processes so that there can be clarity as to, because obviously taxpayers today would naturally be confused. Do I pay to the federal government or do I pay to the state government? So we have two laws, two policy positions emanating from two different tiers of government. Yeah. So at this point, the summary of it all is that there has to be a final determination of this question. This is a matter that I believe is most likely going to end at the Supreme Court. And I think in the interest of all of us as Nigerians, it really should indeed end at the Supreme Court so that the Supreme Court brings clarity and finality to this question. But if you ask me that what would I as a Nigerian citizen favor, I would want to see a Nigeria where the states are viable. I want to see a Nigeria where the individual states are moving out, putting on what we, in general parlance, they're thinking caps, deepening investment climates in their states, making their states attractive to investment. Because when we say VAT, what exactly do we mean by VAT? In everyday language, it's just simply the taxes on basic goods and services that are not exempted under the VAT Act. So, and you would observe that most of the states that contribute the largest chunk of this VAT revenue, they are states where, relative to the Nigerian climate, there are states where the investment environment is thriving relative to Nigeria. Okay. So it's not an accident that you find the bulk of the VAT revenue coming from states. For example, Lagos State, obviously, I think Lagos State even takes about 90% of that. So that raises the question.
I'll have to. I can see this is a topic you're very passionate about. But let me move your way to politics because hopefully we can pick your brains on this. In the context of what you said, and you're clearly excited about us having that conversation about fiscal federalism and generally federalism as it ought to be. We're moving towards 2023, and we're seeing parties vying and positioning themselves to present to us who they feel would be the right presidential candidate. As people now, looking at Nigeria where we are, what kind of a candidate should we be looking for in terms of a more progressive Nigeria?
For a more progressive Nigeria, thank you. I straight to that, it's like asking me as a Nigerian citizen that what would I want to see in my next president? Yes. Now, I think I would prefer to take that conversation from where we are coming from. Yes. And where we are coming from, I would limit it to the civil governance experiment we've been having since about 1999. Now, we record at that time, most of the persons in the civil society today, most of the people who actually fought to push the military out of governance, they had some level of apathy towards political participation in elective offices at that time. I remember, as of 1999, most of the people in the civil society, some of the things we heard was that we should boycott some said we should even boycott the elections because it was a military contraption and all of that. With the benefit of hindsight, I'm sure that persons who held that view at the time know that that was a tactical error because most of the parties at that time, that they were just an elite contraption at the time. Now, moving back from 1999 to 2015, we saw the trajectory of how, what our expectations as citizens were and what led to what appeared to be a quite exciting or highly participatory election in 2015. But now, between 1999 to 2015, we were not satisfied as Nigerians, clearly. Between 2015 and today, we're still not satisfied as Nigerians because we're clearly not exactly happy with the state of the country. So there's nowhere to look, no back to look to. We only have to look forward. Now, in looking forward, what do I want to see in my next president? One, I want to ask questions about the track record of my next president. What has been your record in the private sector, in your public service historically that can recommend you for a higher responsibility? I want to know what the perspective of my next president is on this very important question of federalism. For an heterogeneous society like ours, and all of the situations that we found, both some good, some bad, some completely unpleasant, the question that keeps turning around is that, do we have the right economic and political framework and model to run an heterogeneous society like Nigeria? So I want to know what the position and the historical contribution of my next president to the subject of federalism in a practical sense, not just theoretically. I want to see that. I also want to see in my next president a person that has that inclusive character, a person who makes everybody in the room feel comfortable. Because we are in a situation in Nigeria where there's an heightening level of distrust. There's almost, we're almost in a situation where everybody is doubting, this person is doubting that person. So we need someone who is a unifier, a person who is urbane, a person who is at home, and all of that. Then also apart from that, I want to see in my next president a person that has what I would call a clear ideological coherence. That what exactly is the economic model you want to pursue for Nigeria? And what are the credentials you have to put on the table for Nigerians to show that this model, you understand it, and you have all the details of how it will work? I want to see a president who is at home with intellectualism and scholarship, who is able to say that, look, I understand that the puzzles that build a society all interconnect. And where one puzzle or one of the legs of development in society is off, you would completely have a dysfunctional society. So a president that understands the intersection of all of these ideals, how does education intersect into rule of law? How does healthcare intersect into infrastructure? How does security intersect into even our ability to attract business, attract all of these things? And of course, the list is exhaustive. It's not exhaustive, but I also want to see in my president a person that understands the international dynamics of our place as Africans. Because there is a limit to which, after you have done everything in your country, assuming we even get everything right, there is also the interplay of the international system on how African societies develop. I want a president that can stand before the United Nations General Assembly, start a conversation about development of Africa and all of these things. The list is just on and on.
The truth is this, listening to you just wax on about who this ideal candidate should be. It's almost sounded like we will need a messiah to actually rule Nigeria.
Actually not.
But permit me at this point to look at it from another perspective now. Should we be looking for that man
or woman,
or woman, as the case may be, or a party to lead us into the light?
Well, I would, on the question of parties, I would think that we should be looking out for the individuals that stand out in the respective parties. The truth is that there is no ideological coherence in most of the party formations we have in Nigeria today. But there are shining lights. Even in the current governing party of Nigeria, if we do not need to look far. There are shining lights within that same system.
Can you mention names? Just to regale us a little bit.
So for example, if we're talking about federalism just now, we'll find that when I said that, when I made the statement that Rivers State is welcome to the party because they're in the right party, in Lagos State, for example, one of these issues of fiscal federalism and some of these low-hanging fruits of state policing and all that, these are ideas that have been constructively developed in Lagos State, even as far back as between the years 1999 to 2007, when Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu was governor of Lagos State. And interestingly, the current vice president of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, was the attorney general at that time. Most of the decisions that you see that have advanced the cause of federalism in Nigeria since the beginning of this civilian experiment that we're having, you will find the imprimatur of the current vice president of Nigeria. You will find his ideas, you will find his postulations in court, you will find his contribution both at the scholarly level and in the practical level. You find all of those things in all of this process. So if, for example, as we stand today, there is a debate as to who where we throw the dragnet, just almost like fishing for our next president. And then you want to bring in the persons that are publicly known today, who have some track record. I would be surprised if we are not having that consideration around persons who have had that history of participation in some of this national discourse. And with respect, platforms like the civil society platforms like the press, such as, of course, your esteemed platform too, those are some of these questions that we then throw up. These are questions we hope that you would please help us put together by the time we are bringing the presidential candidates to the fore, because they will obviously come to you. You want to ask them questions. What are you going to be giving to Nigerians?
Yes.
What is your history? And then these are the things that Nigerians want to see in their president.
Permit me to interject at this point. I like your energy. And we're not trying to get you to solve all the problems of Nigeria today. But however, since you've started like this, you're talking about shining lights. And we know our history. These shining lights, like you say, they're already within. They're amongst us. Why do you think, to date, they haven't managed to surface and put themselves forward in pole position? Why do we have candidates who don't seem to reflect what you're saying at the fore? I'm asking that question so you can say how we can turn things around.
I think the way the structure of the 1999 Constitution is such that there is almost very little you can do as a even almost as a state governor, except for some of these activities here and there where conversations are being broadened. It's very important for us to be very deliberate about our next president, the person who takes the number one seat, because essentially the president sets the tone. The president sets the direction, sets the inspiration. So for example, what you would find, for example, in the current president, what we do here as everyday citizens is that the current president is not somebody you can go and meet and say you want to go and be doing some corruption deals with. Like, that's almost a reputation that we can take for granted, that when it comes to going about cutting deals, you would not find the current president in there. So I feel we are in a situation, we are in a state where we are at a point of what I can call a transitional phase. We have seen where we started from, like I just paraphrased, from 1999. Yeah. We've seen where we are. We've seen some of the things we probably didn't, avert our minds to in 2015, 2019, and then we are now looking to the future, taking the benefits of the goods that we may have had between 1999, because obviously it's not all gloomy. I mean, we are all still standing, and we hope that we continue to stand. We hope the country gets better. But there certainly have been situations that have tried us, that have questioned our existence as a nation. There are situations that have even made us to completely disapprove of our leaders. But we can pick the good things and see what we can build on them, reflect on the things that that have not been done well, and see how we can ensure. And so those are the conversations we would expect when the debate gets raved up, to begin to say that this happened, and this was the reaction of the country to it. This was the impact it had on the country. What are you going to do differently when you are president? What are you going to do differently when you are a governor? What are you going to do differently, and all of that? But all I would say is that the person at the helm of affairs is going to be very significant to the next phase of the Nigerian democratic experience.
I want to say many thanks to you, Mr. Akintayo Iwilade, for joining us today and helping us unravel and unpack some major issues here in Nigeria.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Always a pleasure.